about a week away from the conference, the lady that was holding it called me and she was like, "Hey, Shelly, you got your message?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." And she said, "Well, the conference is called God's Wild About You." And I was like, "Okay, great." And she goes, "So we're doing an animal theme. So you have to have an animal title." And I'm like, "An animal?" And what? So I told Todd, I'm like, and I'm not good with titles. You know, I'm good with subjects, not titles, you know. And so I'm like, but this thought came to mind, zookeepers and game wardens. And so here's the difference, and there's a difference. They both work with animals, and if you were to ask them, they would both say they love animals. But you see, there's a difference. A zookeeper will feed the animals, they will care for the animals, they will give them medical care, they will help them live to a ripe old age, they will make sure that all of their daily needs are met, they will clean up after them, they will make sure that they never want for anything except freedom. A game warden will make sure that the animals are free. Now, there may be some lean days, and there may be some days when they're thirsty, and they're going to be scarred up a little bit, and there may be some days where they're not feeling all that great, and there's not medical care readily available, but they make sure that they're always alive and they're always free. And so, in today's context, we're going to talk about, we all have these operating, residing beliefs in our life. And they can either be game wardens or they can be zookeepers, right? They can either keep us caged in, we're alive, but we're not free. We're existing, right? But we're not free. Or they can be game wardens. They can propel us into a destiny of freedom. They can help us live up to our potential. And so we're going to explore that for a little bit. In order to move into the goals, and see, usually by this time of year, most people, the majority of people, have like New Year's resolutions are done. Not that they've accomplished them, they're just done. I'll worry about that January 1 of 2020, right? Not going to think about it anymore. They give up. But a lot of that has to do with those zookeeper mentalities that we hold within ourselves, right? Because it didn't happen the first week, so it's just not going to happen, right? And a lot of these things come about from maybe when we're kids, or maybe things that mistakes that we've made as adults, or things that have happened to us, right? Not every bad image that we have inside of us comes from things we've done. Sometimes it comes from things that have been done to us. And I'll just share a little bit of my story. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but I was raised with my paternal grandparents, my biological father's parents. And we were taken away by the state when I was about 2 months old. And I have an older brother who is 17 months older, so he was probably about 20 months old. I have an older half-sister from my father who was 6 years older than me. She's passed away in, 2003, because Drew was 10. I have a younger half-brother and sister from my father that I haven't seen since we were all little bitty, because their mother doesn't want to have anything to do with the McLeans. And, you know, rightfully so. If I were treated the way she was treated, I'd probably feel the same way. I didn't meet my biological mother until probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And I have a half-brother from her. And she passed away last year. But anyway, so, you know, there's some history there. And so that in and of itself is a lot to deal with when you're growing up as a kid, because, you know, you feel like, now I knew my father growing up. I knew him, and I knew he had 5 kids that he didn't want. My older sister, he didn't even pay child support on. My great-grandfather, of all people, ended up paying all the child support so that he could maintain that contact and she could still be part of the family. My brother and I, he signed away our rights. The little brother and sister, he signed away their rights. I don't know why he kept having kids if he didn't want them, but he did. He died at the age of 48. He had been married. He was on his 7th marriage when he died. So he was just a very selfish man. okay? Um, when I was a senior in high school, I had received a Christmas present from him, and it stands out because I had never gotten one from him before, ever. And it was a watch. And so I had seen him a month or so after Christmas, and I just was, you say thank you. So I just said, hey, I want to thank you for the Christmas gift. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, it was a watch. And I showed him the watch, and I said, I just want to thank you. And he said, I didn't get you anything. I got your brother something. I didn't get you anything. And he had always, growing up, he would take my brother to do stuff. And so how many of you know that has an effect on you as a child? And what had happened was his last wife felt bad because he didn't get me anything. And so she didn't want me to feel bad and got me something. And so you grow up with these kind of things. Well, not only is that dynamic going on, okay, but I don't know what happened to my brother, before I was born. And he's still a baby when I was born, right? He's little. He's not even 2 years old. But my grandmother said that by the time they got custody of us, she couldn't leave us alone. She couldn't leave us where he could reach me because he would try to hurt me all the time. And he would take my bottle and hide it. And she told me that she would be afraid to, as we grew up, to leave us anywhere because she was afraid he would kill me. And he was very physically abusive with me. And he would, and that's just how I grew up. And so there's that dynamic going on. Okay, now on top of that dynamic, my grandmother was like really messed up, and for some reason, my grandmother just didn't like me. And I don't know why. I remember there was a couple that they were real good friends with, and I always knew them growing up. But they lived in Houston, and we would see them a couple of times a year. We would, either go there or they would come here. And they're Fayrene and Lowell Matheny. And, I remember just one day in passing, they were getting ready to come down or something, and I was still probably 8 or 9. And my grandmother said, hey, Fayrene and Lowell coming, and yeah, I know they're coming. And she said, well, we almost gave you to them one time. Now, that seems like a sort of innocent statement in passing, but when you have a child who already has been displaced, right? Even if they haven't been displaced, I've had days where my kids I've wanted to I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I've never wanted to give them away, right? So I'm thinking, you wanted to give me to them? And so I asked her, I said, well, why didn't you? Now, what I wanted to hear was, well, because we love you, obviously, duh. What I heard was, well, first of all, you're our obligation. And secondly, you're the only full-blood sibling your brother has, and we figured he probably needed to know you growing up. And things never got better. One of the last interactions I had where my grandmother was coherent, she had dementia when she died. She was living here, and Todd and I had bought her a car. My grandfather died in 95, and we had bought her a car. And my brother and my aunt and uncle were supposed to help us, and you know how that goes. They didn't. And so we ended up buying this car, and it had been several years, and it was an older car to begin with, and it wasn't like the best car, but it was wheels, and she didn't do a whole lot. She drove to the store and home. But she wanted a new car. But the backstory to that is because the car's in our name, the insurance company called me, and she'd had several fender benders in a very short period of time. And they told me, if she has one more, we're not going to insure her anymore. I said, okay, I'll talk to her. Well, during that same period of time, she had knee replacement surgery. And so we had the knee replacement. At that time, all the family had moved away. I'm the only one in town. When she got out of the hospital, she refused to do rehab in the hospital. She's just stubborn. I brought her home, to my home. I put her in my bed because we had a master bathroom, so it was right there. She didn't have to move. and set her up. I was going to take care of her. And, she said, I want to go home. I don't like it here. And I said, Mom, I know you want to go home. I know, but I don't want you going home because, I can't be at your house. She lived across town from me. And at that point, Josh was probably 4, and Drew and Christy were, in second and first grade probably. They were little. I had to take care of them. I had to be at home. And she said, you either take me home or I'm going to call a cab. I'm going home. You're not keeping me here. Okay. So I loaded her up. I took her home. Well, the next day, she called me. She said, you know what? I'm not going to drive again. We're having the insurance problem. Sell the car. I said, okay. I was busy. The car was paid off at that point. I didn't care about the car. I wasn't worried about it. I said, all right, whatever. She called me the next day. Sell the car. She called me the following day. For 2 weeks, every day she would call me, sell the car. I was busy, and I just kept saying, I'll get around to it. Well, during that time, Todd's dad had a car that he sold, and then he listed it in the paper, and he sold. He sold it immediately, and he had another person that called wanting to buy his car, and he said, you know what? I don't have a car for sale, but I think my son does. So this lady called us and said, hey, do you have a car for sale? And I'm like, well, we kind of do. So she bought the car. Well, then my grandmother calls me and says, buy me a new car. And I said, Mom, I can't buy you a new car. And I think we ended up selling her car for like $1,000. And at that time, we couldn't afford to buy our new car. We were trying to buy a new house, and we were trying to get bills paid off. And honestly, we couldn't afford it. And she didn't need to be driving. And her knee still, she was refusing to go to, she couldn't. And she said, you're going to buy me a new car. And I said, Mom, I can't buy, I can't. Fine. And hung up the phone. Well, the next day, I got a couple of phone calls from relatives that I hadn't seen or spoken to in 20 years, screaming at me, cussing me out, telling me what a sorry piece of dirt I was because I had taken away my grandmother's car. She had sacrificed her life to raise me. And what had happened was she was trying to manipulate me into buying her a new car, right? And when I couldn't do that, she called all of our relatives. She went through her entire phone book. And not only our relatives, but every family friend, everybody she knew. And she told this story. And so I called her and I said, why did you do that? I don't know what you're talking about. I never called anybody. And I said, okay, now you're lying again, because how do they know this story? There's only 2 people that would, you're the only person on the planet this story would come from, and she would never admit it. And to the day that she died, as long as she could remember who I was, she would say, why did you take my car away from me? And and so how many of you know those sort of things, they put stuff in your life that affect you, or they have the capacity to affect you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you overcome those things? Second Corinthians, and this is in the Voice translation, 2 Corinthians 10, verse 4 and 5, says, the weapons of war that we're fighting are not of this world, but are powered by God and effective at tearing down the strongholds erected by his truth. We are demolishing arguments and ideas, every high and mighty philosophy that pits itself against the knowledge of the one true God. We are taking prisoners of every thought, every emotion, and subduing them into obedience to the Anointed One. And that's what we have to do when we have these negative things come up, when we're fighting these ideas that we're not good enough or that we don't deserve, whatever. You know, I'm a strong believer that I think God has created each of us for a purpose. But I really don't think that very many of us live out that purpose. And I think that I think they're like splinters. You know how when you were little, you'd get a splinter and you'd have to dig it out because if you didn't get it out, it would become infected? I think when we're little, these things happen to us, whether on purpose or incidentally, and we have infected hearts. And they begin to stunt how our direction in life goes. And we have to fight. We have to take back control. We have to remember who we are in Christ. A few years ago, probably 3 years ago, around Thanksgiving. Now, when I tell this story, I'm telling this story as an illustration for a spiritual principle, not as an illustration on how you should deal in the physical realm, because what I did was very dangerous and I should not have reacted the way I did, but I did. But I was working at I was managing a Subway, and I told this story. This is not in my notes, but the reason I was managing Subway was because we had merged, and I think this is important to share, because sometimes when things happen, when we're on our way to a destination, especially if it's a personal goal, or if it's maybe it's education, maybe it's not a career or something, and we get sidetracked. A lot of times we just allow that to stop us, and we never go any further. And I was working at Subway because we had merged, and I had not been in favor of the merge. I was very much against the merge. And I had done everything I could do to dissuade Todd from merging the churches. And I really feel like I'm totally convinced that if I would have done anything else, we would have been divorced. I mean, that's how far I went to keep this from happening. But as we're going into the merge, the reason I didn't go to work at the church was because I was in a meeting and I was treated extremely dishonestly. I was told something in my face, and then an email was sent out exactly the opposite to the entire staff 10 minutes after that. It was unethical. It was a lie. It was wrong. It would be wrong not only for a church, it would be wrong for corporate America to treat anybody that way. And then not only did they treat me unethical behind closed doors, unethically, in public, they demeaned and humiliated me. We had an event in my building with my people, and I was publicly mocked from the stage. And I told Todd, I am not going to subject myself to them. So now I find myself in a situation where I've pastored a church for 15 years. I've helped build this, and now through no decision of my own, it's gone. And I'm at Subway. And I could have got bitter, and I could have given up, and I could have got mad at Todd, and I could have got mad at God, and if I'd have done that, I'd still be working at Subway. But instead, I said, you know what, God, I don't understand this, but I know this is not where we're supposed to be, and I know we're going to get it back. So I worked things out with Todd, and I kept my faith in God, and we got it back. So listen, and that's not even in my notes, but when we're trying to change our life, when we get derailed, don't let that stop you. We're going to have times in life where things don't make sense, and it's not fair, and we didn't have anything to do with the choices. But that doesn't mean it's gone forever. That just means we have to stand up and stiffen our backs and just keep standing. When we're tired, we just keep standing. Now, going back to my story. So I'm working at Subway, and it's like right in the middle of lunch rush. And one of the girls comes in, and she's like, Shelly, there's a guy in your car. And I said, it's probably my husband looking for something. And I mean, literally, it's like 12:15, and I'm busy. And I said, it's probably Todd. He'll be all right. She goes, it's not Todd. You need to go check this out. I'm like, I'll look at it later. So in my head, I'm thinking there's someone walking around my car or whatever, because my car kind of sticks out. It's that bright blue Mustang sitting out there, right? And I'm thinking, I'll look at it. No, she goes, Shelly, you don't understand. He's in your car, and you need to go out there right now. So I'm like, fine. So I go out there, and he's got my car doors open, and I think maybe the hood was up, the trunk was open for sure. And everything in my car is spread down the sidewalk. And he has got my steering column torn apart because he's trying to steal my car and he can't figure out how to do it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, this is my car. And I said, this is not your car. It's my car. And he held up this old Ford key, and it was not even the key that goes to that model car because it was about 15 years older. Anyway, he's holding up this old key, and he's like, this is the key to it. I'm like, that's not the key to the car. He's like, this is my car. And then he changed the story. He's like, well, I said, that's not even the key to this model car. It's not your car. He said, well, the police, I forgot the keys, and the police came in and popped it for me. And I'm like, dude, this is my car. It's not, I'm telling you, this is my car. And I'm like, you're an idiot. So anyway, I'm in uniform, right? I'm working at Subway. I have my name tag on. I said, dude, do you see this name right here? Yeah. I said, this name is on that car. And see, I have vanity plates, and my name is literally on the license plate. And he was like, don't send me to jail. I just got out of jail this morning. And he did. And I said, well, you're about to go back. And see, what happens is we have to know what's ours and what has our name on it. Come on. We have to know what God has prepared for us, because the devil's going to try to keep us from it. And our past is going to try to keep us from it. And those negative voices and emotions that run through our brains all the time, they're going to try to keep us from it. And we have to know what's ours. 1 Peter 5:8, and this is in the Common English Version, says, be clear-headed and keep alert. Your accuser, the devil, is on the prowl like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And see, this guy thought he was going to steal his second car of the day because he'd already stolen one earlier after he got out of jail. But I wasn't going to let him steal my car. I wanted my car. It was my car. It had my name on it. And there are things in life that God has put your name on. There are things he created you to do that only you can do. I went to a funeral yesterday of a young man that was in our church years ago. He's Christy's age, a year older than Christy. And Junior and Christy were in youth group with him. And Junior, actually, he was his college roommate for a year or a semester or something like that at Howard Payne. And I don't know how he died. I know that after he got out of high school, his whole adult life, he had a drug problem. And it was just sad. It was just sad. But the thing, they asked if anyone wanted to come up and say anything. And I did, because Dustin he was a good kid. The thing I remember about Dustin was always like the Energizer Bunny. He was always excited about something, right? And he's always like, and he would always come up, and he always had something to tell Todd. Every service. And so, Todd and I are usually together, and he would always say, Pastor Todd, and he always had something to tell Todd. And he's always just, not. And so I told him, I said, there's only one thing that I can think of about Dustin, and he's amplified. And so everybody's like, that's Dustin, It was funny. We had built this new youth building, and we'd had it a week open. And he put a hole in the wall the size of his body because he was running, and he wanted to run up the wall and do a flip, but he didn't run up the wall. He just ran through the wall. That was just him. But in his adult life, he struggled because he let all these negative things impact him and stop him. And the thing was about everyone, not only the kids that were there that was from our youth group, but everyone besides that. Everyone said, man, all Dustin did, I didn't know a thing about God till I met Dustin. And all Dustin did was talk about God. And all Dustin did was tell me about Jesus. And I wouldn't be saved if it weren't for Dustin. And Dustin never was able to shut down these voices. And see, we all do that to some extent. We have to be able to learn to shut these things down. We have to know what's ours, and we have to be able to shut them down and say, that's mine. My name is on that. My destiny is on that. I know that I'm called to be the pastor of Christian Faith Center. Even with all the stuff going on in my life and, with parents and grandparents and brothers and blah, 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 blah. When I was little, when I would play church. And I would line all my stuffed animals up and I would preach to them. And there weren't female preachers back then, right? But that's how I would play when I was little because it was something I was created to do. So we have to know what our name is on. And so after that, he was like, don't send me back. I'm like, dude, you're going back. And listen, I wasn't being mean. You're not merciful. Well, here's the thing. Because I researched this guy later. He had just gotten out of jail that morning because he had stolen a car a few days before, and his mother went and bailed him out. He had stolen a car right before he had broken into mine and tried to steal mine. And all the stuff that he had laying out on the sidewalk, it wasn't all mine. He had been on the Walmart parking lot breaking into cars because this is in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, okay? So he's got all these gift cards and I don't know what all. And so he's got a really bad drug habit, and so he's doing this so he can feed his drug habit. So he's got all this stuff, and after they arrested him that day, and I'll tell the rest of that story later, but after they arrested him that day, his mom went and bailed him out again. 2 days later, he was arrested again in another stolen car, except this time he also had a stolen gun with him. So he was escalating. This young man needed to be in jail. His mother did not need to keep bailing him out. He needed to be somewhere where he could get help. And so, no, I did not show him mercy, but he needed to be in jail. So anyway, he's like, and so my coworker, I'm like, call 911. I'm mad. And I'm Irish, and I'm magically delicious. No, I have a wee bit of a temper. I have a little bit of a temper. And so, the fight or flight thing, I have never flee. I don't run. I fight. I know. 2 different times I've been at home, one by myself and one was with Todd. People are trying to break into my house. I'm there. I'm like, how stupid are you? I've got a gun. Hello. And Todd's like, call 911. I don't need 911. I have a gun, I don't know. The whole thing of runaway, that never enters into my head. So anyway, I've got these 2 bags that I had in my car, these 2 tote bags that some friends of ours in Odessa had celebrated an anniversary at their church, and their 40th anniversary or something like that, and they had their church name and logo on them, so I know those were my bags. There's no way he went to church in Odessa. He was in jail, right? So he's got them crammed full of my stuff, right? And so he picks up these bags, he starts to run away, and I said, you're not leaving with my stuff. And so he took a step, and I grabbed him, which the police was like, did he touch you first? I'm like, no, but he had my stuff. So he's touching my stuff. And the police, and what I had forgotten that Todd had put 2 big hunting knives in my car in case, people did stuff like that. I could defend myself. And I forgot about that, but he had them in his pockets, and I didn't realize that because I forgot that they were in my car. But anyway, he had this ring because I had worn it to work by accident, and I don't like to work and stuff like this because I actually lost a real expensive diamond one time doing that. So I had left it in my car that day, and so he had this in his pocket. He had, a lot of stuff. He had like a medical debit card that I don't know why it was in my car, but I'd left it in there. And anyway, so he started to run off, and I grabbed him. I said, "You're not leaving with my stuff." And so he dropped them, and he started to he dropped the bags, but he still had, I said, "You're not leaving here with my stuff." And we kind of got into a little tussle. He pushed me. He tried to hit me, but, I'm like, I got the moves, I freaked my coworkers out. They did not say boo to me for a week. They're like, "I don't know what neighborhood you were raised in, but I did. I went to Edison Junior High. There was free white girls there, and I'm kidding. But anyway, he missed. He swung at me, but he missed. But he started to run off again, and I grabbed him again, and it ripped his shirt. I said, "You are not leaving here with my stuff." And he started running again, and as he's running, he's throwing stuff out of his pockets. And not just my stuff. He started throwing his stuff out of his pockets, right? And so he's, for 100 yards across the parking lot, there's stuff strewn everywhere. And a guy was coming out of like Dollar Tree or Sally or something down the way and saw this guy throwing stuff, and he was like, "That looks weird." And so he stopped, and he saw him throw my medical debit card, and he picked it up, and it happens to be a tennis pro here in town that I know. And he's like, "I know her." And he had Todd's information, so he called Todd, and by that point I had already talked to Todd, and Todd was on his way. He's like, "Todd, some guy just threw your wife's credit card." And Todd was like, "Yeah, I know, I'm on the way." But while he's doing all this stuff, he accidentally threw out other stuff, right? So he ran into Walmart, and we lost him for a while, but I'm talking to the cops, and so Todd's with my car and all the stuff thrown out on the sidewalk, and I'm walking, picking up knives and rings and everything he threw everywhere. Okay, and the police are taking pictures before I can pick it up because they have to document everywhere. And so I'm walking with this police officer, and Junior, Christy's husband, was with Todd, and he called me. He said, "Shelly, can you come back here for a minute?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll be right there." So I walked back, and he pointed at this orange thing laying on the ground. And he goes, is that the guy? And what had happened was he really had just gotten out of jail that morning, and in jail they give you an orange ID bracelet, and it has your name and address and picture on it. So he threw that out when I told him not to leave with my stuff. He also didn't leave with his stuff, and he threw out his ID band, and so the police just went to his house and picked him up. So you have to know what your name is on, and you have to want it. Okay? You have to want what's yours. John 10:10 in the Passion Version says, "A thief has only one thing in mind. He wants to steal, slaughter, and destroy. But I have come to give you everything in abundance, more than you expect, life in its fullness until you overflow." And see, sometimes you have to fight for what you want. Sometimes you have to fight to be whole. Sometimes you have to fight to overcome those negative feelings and emotions. Sometimes you have to fight for what's yours. When we were in our 30s, Todd and I went to a counselor in San Antonio for marriage counseling. And we met with him for like 10 minutes. And he was like, "Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to fix both of you individually, and then your marriage won't be an issue." And so we're like, "Okay, well, that sounds good." So he worked on Todd, and these were like, it wasn't just come and sit down and talk to me for an hour and you're good. This was 5 days, 8 hours a day, a 40-hour week of intensive therapy. And so Todd went and did his, and you had to write your life story down. And Todd went and did his, and he came back, and he was good. He was fixed, and everything was good, and life was rosy, and ta-da! And so, and this guy, he's a good guy. He used to be a pastor in San Antonio, and then he decided he wanted to go into more in the counseling field, so he went and got his doctorate in counseling. and it's biblically based. And so then I booked my turn, and I wrote my life story. And I went down there, and I went for 2 days, and I got mad and left. And I didn't tell this first service, but I started feeling in worship that I need to explain why I got mad and left. The reason I got mad and left was because when I was being raised, everybody I knew told me that my grandmother was an angel, and, I can't believe that, she's second. And you got to understand, these days it's not uncommon for grandparents to raise their grandkids. When I was with my grandmother, there was only one other person that I knew that was being raised by my grandparents, and it was my brother, okay? It just didn't happen. And so everybody told me how wonderful it was that, she was such an angel, and she got us in church, and I can't believe how lucky you are. And so she was like, ta-da! She was Billy McLean, And so when I got there, and so my whole life story was focused on how mean my brother was. And so when I got there, he said, this stuff started with your brother when he was a baby. He's not responsible. Your grandmother's responsible. Why didn't she stop it? And that made me mad because my grandmother's the angel. She's the savior. She's the one that rescued me. And he's like, no, she may have gotten you from your mother and your father, but she didn't. She was like abusive, and that made me mad, and I left. So when I went back, I stayed home for about a month, and I was miserable. So I called him again. I'm like, all right, I need to come back. He goes, okay, well, you're going to rewrite your story, but you're going to have to tell the truth. And so I did. And I think the reason that's important is this, because in the story, yes, the first time I blamed my brother for some things that he did, but I also blamed myself for some stuff my grandmother did. And if you were abused by anyone at any time, it is not your fault. You didn't deserve it. You didn't cause it. It wasn't because of an attitude or a behavior, and you need to quit blaming yourself. So anyway, my time's running out. But anyway, I went back down there, and after about the third day, and the thing is, with this counseling, you have to open up, and with healing, sometimes you got to hurt. It's like digging the splinter out. You kind of have to make a bigger hole to get the splinter out, He's like, I can't get to your emotions. I could talk about this stuff, but it was just like factual. He's like, you don't feel anything. Well, when you're growing up in the situation that I was raised in, if your brother's hurting you, if you pretend it doesn't bother you, he'll stop, right? So you just shut everything down. I was totally shut down. And we broke for lunch, and we came back from lunch, and he said, I was praying during lunch, and I can't help you. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? You help Todd. Todd's worse than I am. What do you mean you can't help me? Todd was the opposite. Todd felt everything, and Todd shared He said, God told me to tell you, Holy Spirit told me to tell you, you need to go back to your hotel room, and you need to pray, and he's going to heal you. And I have to tell you that the first thought that came to mind was, I've been praying my whole life. I was raised in church. I've been praying my whole life. He hadn't healed me. He hadn't fixed me yet. Why? What difference is today gonna make? But I didn't have any other choice. I was out of options. And I went back to my hotel room, and I put on some praise and worship music. And he told me, he said, call me in the morning and let me know what happened. And so I went back to my hotel room, put on some praise and worship music. And it probably wasn't 20 minutes. And I just felt not a weird, spooky thing, but I just felt like God's presence in that hotel room. And I just began to pray, and I just began to share with him. I was tired of hurting. I was tired of being miserable. I was tired of carrying other people's weight. And I wanted to be what he created me to be. And I just felt like this big weight was being like lifted off my chest. I just felt healed. I had to fight. I knew what my name was on, but I had to fight for it. There are times in life you're going to have to fight. Now, the good news is he fights with us, and he's a lot stronger than we are, right? But there are times in life where it takes effort, and it takes pain. Colossians 3:2 in the Passion Translation says, yes, feast on all the treasures of the heavenly realm and fill your thoughts with heavenly realities and not with the distractions of the natural realm. That's how we fight. We replace the old thoughts with his thoughts, the distractions of what we're not. You know, I read an article this week, I sent it to Todd, about there's a shift in kids. Instead of teaching them to have good self-esteem, they're teaching them to have good compassion. Because see, self-esteem is based on what I'm good at. If I make good grades, I'm a good person. If I do a kind deed, I'm a good person. Self-compassion says even when I blow it, I'm a good person. And so if you have self-compassion, self-esteem is sort of like a byproduct of it, right? So when we replace those negative thoughts, we don't have to perform to have what God says about us, because it's not about us. I'm holy because of his blood. I'm sanctified because of his blood. I'm righteous because of his blood. And whether something was done to me in the past or whether I did something I'm ashamed of in the past, I am not defined by my past. You know, here's how you need to look at it. And this helped me when I realized this. It's kind of like when you go to college, right? When you go to college, you're studying to be, say, a doctor or a nurse. If I'm studying to be a doctor, I don't worry about high school anymore, because high school didn't prepare me to be a doctor, but what I'm doing now prepares me to be a doctor. So I concentrate on being a doctor, and I start thinking like a doctor and start acting like a doctor, and I get the knowledge of a doctor, right? That's how we have to think about life. Those things in our past, they're in the past, okay? We have to leave them there. We have to forgive others, and we have to forgive ourselves, and we have to start thinking like we're free. And we have to start studying like we're free and behaving like we're free and living the destiny that God created us to live and think and dream and be. And we'll close with this one last scripture. 2 minutes over. I can't believe that. I never go late. Philippians 4:13, and this is in the Amplified. It says, I can do all things which he has called me to do through him who strengthens me and empowers me to fulfill his purpose. I am self-sufficient in Christ's sufficiency. I am ready for anything and equal to anything through him who infuses me with inner strength and confident peace. Y'all stand, and I want to pray for you this morning as we leave. And that's our prayer, that he would infuse you with that inner strength and confident peace. Father, I come to you in the name of Jesus. Lord, and I thank you that 2019 is going to be a turning point. Father, that we would just shake off the past, that we would just let go of those things that have hindered us, those thoughts that have just kept us held back all this time. And Father, we would replace them with your thoughts. Father, I thank you for enabling us to forgive those who have hurt us in the past. We release them so that we can let go of that stuff. Father, I thank you for healing hurts. Father, I thank you for binding up the brokenhearted, for giving us new hearts. Father, I thank you that those places that we've kept hidden, that we don't even talk about, we don't even like to think about ourselves. Father, you shine your light on and you clean them up and you put them back together and you make us whole. Father, I thank you for reawakening dreams and goals. Father, I thank you for reminding us of those things you have our name on. And Father, I thank you for the inner strength for us to fight for them. And we worship you and we praise you and we thank you for your peace and your confidence. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.